name is Sabine, and we're going to be doing this doco, Me and Lucy. And I'm standing here in front of Cornelessen and Sons in London, a very venerable art store and a very beautiful one, as you'll see very soon. I am French, but I've been living in Australia for nearly 2 decades now, and I have 2 art stores over there. But I'm doing something very special. I'm not just spying on competition on the other side of the world. I'm actually been working here for quite a few months now, but only 1 day a week. And I'm cleaning and sorting and trying to understand what the huge amount of archives in pigments and other art materials that Cornelessen have been putting aside for many, many years. And as the warehouse was closing, this had to happen. And so what's very special about this store, and I suppose any venerable store, is that they are real colormen, as it says. They've been around for a long time, 1855. And of course, that will give you already a good reputation as an art store, but it also means that business was conducted quite differently at the time, and colormen were really makers, purveyors, sorcerers of pigments from all over the world. So it's quite a different thing from having an art store today. Okay, well, we'll go inside and then we'll meet the lovely Lucy with whom I am doing this thing. So this is the lovely Lucy, who I met through Instagram. And when I approached Cornelessen to try and get some information about some of the historical pigments I had bought from them, the answer was a bit slow in coming, and I knew she worked here. So I contacted her and we had a drink, and that's how this whole project actually started together, because she was in the process of clearing out that big warehouse in Wimbledon. But before we, discovered all of these connections, which was wonderful, I knew already a little bit about her, and I would love her to tell us a bit more about her project, because she's definitely, if I would call myself a pigment researcher, maybe, who doesn't know very much and has a lot to learn, she is definitely a pigment maker.
So London Pigment has been a project that I've worked on for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I've always had an interest in making paint from scratch, but not necessarily sourcing the pigment itself for the paint. I had a bit of a eureka moment when on the foreshore of the Thames. I think a lot of people in London go through their mudlarking stage. And I'd never done it before, so I was on the foreshore in Shadwell, having a look and seeing what's going on the foreshore, what tiny little objects I could possibly find. And I saw all these people collecting, prior to me going there, collecting all these amazing objects, coins, gold, all of these things. And there's nothing on this beach but what they call Thames spuds. And Thames spuds are these bricks and various other materials that have been worn down over time through this tide going in and out. They've lost all of their detail, and they're basically these little spuds or potato-shaped objects. And I picked one up, and it was red brick. So beautiful, it's like a really worn stone. And I noticed just almost from the sweat from my hand that all of the clay started coming off, and I was just totally amazed. And it just connected in my brain a few dots. That actually I didn't necessarily have to go to a colorman to collect pigment or make paint from the pigment that I buy here, but actually there are a lot of other materials that haven't yet been
Explored,
haven't yet been explored. And so I simply, I don't know, it became such a joyous moment for me to just pick up a little rock, literally go to the the wall of the embankment and make a mark. And I think a lot of people who I've been in contact with who are having a similar pigment journey have this moment where materials that you just find around you can be used in a completely different way. And so I made a mark with red brick, yellow brick, slate, chalk, pottery, and also like the actual mud of the Thames as well. Obviously, it's got a lot of pollution in it, but its basis is London clay, which is a really beautiful browny green, similar to raw umber. So just standing in one spot in Shadwell, on the bank of the Thames, I suddenly had all these colours that meant so much more to me than any other colour I'd ever come into contact with. And so from then on, I was just totally obsessive, and I collected every single thing I could from the street, from parks, from anywhere, just to see what I could do with them. And that was just a massive, that was the very beginning. So we're looking at here our display of our standard pigments at L Cornelissen Sun. We're currently in the middle of Bloomsbury on Great Russell Street. We've been here since the sort of 80s, and actually we were at another location closer to Covent Garden, and actually when we moved, we took all of the Victorian furniture with us. So everything you see here, all the shelving and the pigment jars, they're all Victorian. And you'll see the rest of the shop, actually, it was quite a feat of engineering to get everything to fit into this new space, and almost you wouldn't even realise that a lot of this furniture has even been moved. Some customers even remarked that they didn't really know where they were. they thought they were in the old shop when they came here for the first time. But we're a colormen. We have a whole range of pigments, and also metallic pigments as well. In this shop we have a whole array of brushes, hobs, pencils, Japanese, Chinese brushes, calligraphy brushes. We've got specialist papers, lots of oil mediums, and also lots of gilding materials, amongst lots of other things as well. But what you're looking at here is a selection of our colours, and a lot of our customers will actually look at the pigments through the glass to judge their colour and to figure out what they want. But it's probably not the most ideal way to pick your colours. You really should just buy a few and test them in different binders before you make a decision, because you'd be surprised how much they do change depending on what light they're in and what you mix them with. And L Cornelissen was established in 1855. Prior to that, the founder, Louis Cornelissen, had a business selling lithography materials. He was Belgian, and he came over at the beginning of the 1800s.
And Nicholas took over the shop in about 50 years ago?
In the 70s.
In the 70s.
In the
So
70s.
now Nicholas Walt is the current owner of this beautiful place. So I'm a student this year at City and Guilds of London Art School, doing a very new MA called Art and Materials Histories. And each one of us was asked to choose a material to work on for the year. And I picked pigments, of course. And so first project that I decided to do was to try and do a pigment timeline. I was curious to actually see all those pigments that I haven't sometimes never seen before, and put them all in a row and try and organize them, obviously, historically. So the first thing I bought was this lovely little pigment set, which is how we met with Lucy, because I had questions about it afterwards. And that was my starting point. But as Lucy will show you soon, they also sell here a lot of other pigments, and they also sell a lot of historical pigments. So there's a special drawer where they all live, Lucy does, isn't it? Isn't there? Can you show that to us?
So we have all our early colours in this section.
Yes.
This is the drawer I always get out, which is our lapis lazuli.
Oh, yeah.
Which is totally beautiful. We've got some lead tin yellow and lead tin yellow dark and Realgar. Are there any particulars you want to have a look at?
No, it was just like that, really. I know you produced a beautiful new chart for them.
Oh, yes. So we've got in here genuine vermilion, carmine, which is incredibly bright. We've got Madder Lake, which is quite a soft Madder Lake, but actually is much brighter in a binder. Shungite, which is a Russian mineral black, which is really, really interesting. It's got a really interesting structure to the pigment, so you get this incredible, sometimes almost like a sparkling effect with it. And genuine ivory black, which is made of recycled piano keys.
That's great.
Which is lovely. And that again, this is just nothing really quite can replace the smokiness that the mixing this in a binder and actually diluting it just with water produces. It's really incredible. So it's just in there, and then we have some colour charts as well. Should be in here. Yeah. So this is our colour chart that we also sell. This one here is our kind of standard colour chart, or the regular colours, I suppose. And then this one is the more special, I suppose, more historical, early or rarer colours. So it just goes through the colour groups. But this is just a beautiful object. It's just so nice to compare in a really pure state the pigments, because the pigments here abound in casein, and not a huge amount of casein, so that you get a real feel for the structure of the pigment. So you can kind of see that some are flatter, some have kind of more granular texture, and you wouldn't necessarily get that in oil, for example, where casein allows you to see that. And also it's quite matte, so some pigments actually create more of a glossy finish than others depending on the shape of their particles. So for example, due to use, sometimes some of these swatches are actually burnished with the hand and become quite shiny, whereas some would never do that. And there are the greens, the earths. And when I've made the charts, I've tried to show the transparencies. So I've begun to, when I'm remaking the swatches, to show some brush strokes in there, which kind of gives you an idea of the undertone as well, which is quite nice. So for example, Van Dyke Brown has quite a warm undertone. And then some blacks and some whites. Here we've got the early colour selection, that's what we call it. This is a bit more handmade because we haven't yet finished our digital copy, so you might not be able to see, but these are all different pigments, and these are the same but in a lighter transparency, so they've been mixed with more water. So you've got lapis, Egyptian blue, azurite, blue verditer, smalt, some lovely greens, copper greens, Here we've got carmine, which is actually a really good example of what I was explaining earlier about the finish of the paint actually relying sometimes on the pigment itself. Carmine is this totally velvety finish. It almost absorbs like the light somehow. It's in a way that it doesn't really reflect much. It's very, very matte, which I really like. But then when you dilute it, it kind of loses that quality somehow, and you can't see it quite so much.
Pink though.
Yeah, underneath the plastic. But and then there's Madder Lake and Rose Madder, which is beautiful, and Genuine Vermilion. And here you can see actually, and this will be apparent later, how Genuine Vermilion our genuine synthesized vermilion is very similar to the natural cinnabar. You can't see it here because probably through the camera lens, but the cinnabar tends to be a little bit softer, but it's not hugely clear. But they're not identical actually there. So yeah. Oh, and on the back we've got some yellows and the genuine ivory black there. So there we go. Colour charts.
Thank you. These are the boxes we haven't even touched yet, so there's quite a few of those to go, but we're getting there. And when we get one of those, we actually really don't know what's in there. So what have we got here? Flame Scarlet Litho Offset Ink. And
so these boxes, just the blue plastic crates, this is how the collection came from the warehouse originally to Cornelessen, in quite, I suppose, a disorganised way. Lots of different objects from different eras, a mixture of pigments and historical art materials, ephemera, a lot of printmaking, a lot of nibs, lots and lots of different objects from also different collections. Nicholas was the director of Cornelessen. He is an avid art materials collector. So some of this is his own private collection, but also the historic collection from the companies Cornelessen, Robeson, Brodie and Middleton, Russell and Chapel as well. So it's a whole kind of mixture of different objects from different provenances. And so we're just starting to make some kind of logic or rationale around what we've got. I think Sabine, you said that to me before, that if you find some objects that are similar, obviously it's logical to put them together. So she's been making collections of similar bottles that could be from the same person, perhaps. Mm-hmm. A lot of them look like almost like personal collections, because you've got maybe 10 bottles, all of the same size and design, with pigments in, which have a handmade label, which look 19th century. So where those come from, we don't know. But we're so slowly making sense of what we have. So I don't know if you want to have a look inside this box, but there is a real mixture of objects. Here. You've got what's this one? Oh wow, this is in German, so you might be able to help me, Sabine. Beautiful little bottle there, absolutely exquisite. I mean, it's totally perfect. It's not open. It's obviously evaporated over time. So you've got something like that, and then next to something. Oh, this is lovely. A Robeson's Indian ink with beautiful mid-century label. I mean, that's absolutely gorgeous. White on black. That's quite unusual. Yes, really striking. And actually here is a cigar box.
A cigar box, yes.
Jamaican La Tropical cigars. Can we even open it? Oh.
Yes. Oh Lord.
So I've never even looked in here before. Ah, this looks like a Gilder's, a type of Gilder's Rouge, which they use on glass. That's really interesting. It actually looks like it's got pigment in the back. That's really, really interesting. Gosh, you never know what you're going to find here. Beautiful pair of old calipers or compass. A bone knife. You know, these are just a few random things. I think there might be some nibs in there. So you can see that it's just a magical cornucopia of random objects that all have some sort of relevance to art materials and art making. So that's really nice.
Yes. So for example, Lucy was saying that when I don't know what to do with them and I don't really have provenances and things like that, I've sometimes organized, just at least packed together certain little bottles just because they looked a bit the same. Definitely that's an odd one out. So in the hope that maybe we have a little bit of a collection here. We have this beautiful white lead, which is ground in oil. Still very, very flaky in there. Burnt umber, washed. That one has no label. That one could be
vermilion.
Yeah, definitely vermilion with that black little mark at the top. Oxide of chromium. That one actually says Winsor & Newton, May 1900. And that one is Terre Verte, also from Windsor. And that one is Yellow Ochre from Le France. So already it's not the collection of a specific source. But how did that all come together? Chinese blue from Winsor & Newton too. So that one is actually a little bit of an odd one out. It's slightly wider. So it could have belonged to a painter. They did inherit quite a few collections. I found some interesting letters, you know, people trying to sell the art materials of a more or less famous painter at the end of its life, and obviously approaching Cornelissen was the thing to do. And so whether Nicholas was interested just for himself or for his collection and bought a few of these, that's quite possible. There are quite a few things were labeled, thank God. So we did make some sort of sense, but a lot of them were just like here. This is a lovely little mishmash of really pretty bottles, but not really a clue. Claret Lake, maybe. So, you know, obviously there's nothing. Yeah, it's lovely, that one. It can be a madame. And they're just pretty. So I've actually kept those carmine a little bit aside because although they don't seem to have a family much or something, yes, they're just charming bottles, really.
Cobalt blue glass bottle with nitric acid pure. I want to Cornelessen label. That's beautiful.
It's empty, thank God.
No, it doesn't have anything on it. In it.
No,
but it's still got the. That's quite interesting. It's got a lovely poison written on the back there.
Yeah,
and you know, drunk that
things
one.
like that are just also very unusual. So for the moment, I'm just putting them aside in the hope that a few more might turn up. I've never seen, obviously, it's quite a rare packaging. Never seen pigment presented like this. So they're in the cutest little barrel-shaped paper bags like this. There's two there. Whoops. Fine powder color.
The Cherté Barbe.
Yeah. And
they're quite gorgeous.
They're lovely,
the
aren't they?
kind of packet
really.
you, when you go to Seaside, you will get some like whelks in.
Yes,
or something.
To me, they remind me of ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Delectable.
So, obviously, there was more than one way to do anything and everything a few centuries ago. Everybody had a different way of doing it, a different bottle, a different size. So, all of that is quite exciting and fun in itself. You don't forget what's in them. And yeah, so this has been a little bit what we've been doing for a few months now.
it's been quite satisfying as we've looked through the collection, and Sabine's been making smaller collections within the collections of colour groups or the same bottles or whatever. So it's kind of revealing itself slowly to us.
Yeah.
And it's just really exciting where perhaps these objects could be used in the future, and hopefully we'll have at some point a conservator or chemist or scientist have a look and inspect a few of the bottles which we don't know anything about. That would be really nice, wouldn't it?
Yes, it'd be lovely. Look, you know, I really think this is quite an exceptional little treasure, and it should not leave the private collection but be made available to the general public, at least the people who have the most interest in pigments or artists, whatever. And that there's really hope and scope for a lovely exhibition, maybe, or some sort of didactic presentation, maybe just a long film or something like that. But just so people can appreciate what's here. And I want to thank Nicholas for letting me put my paws on it, because it's been so fun. And I've absolutely enjoyed doing that.
Thank you for helping us. We have quite a few examples of press cakes. Press cakes are when pigments have been pressed into a very dense shape in order to make the weighing and selling of them a lot easier and a lot more manageable, so that you don't have lots of loose powder going everywhere. They were often pressed, well, some of the lakes just used actually the residual water of the process to keep them together, and others actually had alcohol added, and some were simply compressed together. So in front of us here we've got some rose madder granules. You can see we've got some big chunks and some little chunks, and actually they would have all been a similar size to these ones. And often with lakes, at the end of the process, when the pigment's been washed quite a few times but still wet, it's then either extruded into little teardrop shapes or pressed into a almost like a kind of die, or a little bit like an ice cube tray, and you get some uniform shapes. And again, that's really easy for the colormen to scoop them up and actually weigh them. Weighing.
But these were really funny shapes, aren't they?
They're really funny shapes. They're like emojis. So these ones are quite funny. They almost remind me of icing or cement or something very strange, but they're very dense. And again, you literally just once you've purchased them, just break off a little bit, and with your muller break it down before you need to make your paint. And this actually here, this weighing, the scales, the set of scales, let's show you a bit better, was used at our shop when we were on Great Queen Street. That was before the 1970s. And you'd simply just put your press cake in there, and obviously you'd know that there's, I don't know what that is, 200 grams worth, you know, also. So it's a lot better for your health as well, so you haven't got the particulates in the air. And then moving on from these ones, which we don't have any provenance for actually in the collection here, and we've got loads of them. They may be from Lafranc. We have a few from Lafranc, but these look to be ochres, perhaps. Not sure about the white, but those ones are ochres. Over here we've got another maybe perhaps a more exotic press cake. We've got the genuine Indian yellow. This one would have been pressed like this in India, and actually when it comes over, or when it came over, historically, obviously it was banned because of the maltreatment of the animals involved. It would have come in this form, and when broken into, you'll see the colour is revealed. So it's this beautiful deep orange, quite miraculous, really. It's like breaking into a like a rock and finding a mineral or something. This absolutely stinks. It's so pungent and so animal-like. It's a mixture of like a sweetness, but also manure and silage, and yeah, it's absolutely, I can't even deal with it.
And of course, we're not really sure if it's a legend or not, but it's supposed to come from the urine of cows who were only force-fed mango leaves
and dried, and it's quite an animal smell, and once you get it on yourself, you can't get it off. I've tried to wash my hands before, and it just seems to kind of settle in your clothes and everything.
And Victoria Findlay actually went there and never found the place where it was made, and doubted maybe the whole story. But in fact, they've been able to I don't know, they did a huge study about it a couple of years ago or something like that, and they actually ascertained that whatever's in the mango was in the acid of the mango was actually also in the Indian yellow. So it seems like it's a plausible tale. And now to this big beauty.
This mesmerising press cake is one of Nicholas Walt's prized possessions. It is completely 100% cobalt blue pigment that's been pressed into this strange lozenge shape. We don't know much about it, actually. It's in the collection, and it's one of those things that I need to go and mine Nicholas for his knowledge about, and where he perhaps bought it, or whether we've had it for a while. So at this point it's still a little bit of a mystery. But I haven't weighed this one, but I can only assume that this would have been a standard measurement at some time.
But obviously every pigment weighs quite differently. So yes, it's interesting that there was a standard shape, because that would not have given it all a standard weight.
Exactly. Might have been unique to each colour, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah.
But I do love the idea of a whole array of these lozenges. Almost, I don't know, it'd be quite mesmerising to see them all pop out of a kind of mould. I mean, you were saying before that it reminds you of...
Well, I think it's like a ready-made Klein artwork, isn't it? In a sort of way. Although the blue is not quite right, it's still quite lovely. It's quite mysterious what's going on in there. It's actually, I don't know if it's coming out the right way, but it looks a little bit molded or something, but it could be normal. I don't know. So you wouldn't know, Lucy, what that's been compressed with at all? No. You have no idea.
And actually that kind of emphasises how new this, new isn't right, but we're just beginning to unearth these things from the archive, and also researching each object. So this is an example of one of our mysterious objects.
Yes, we've found a few that were really...
it might be worth actually, Sabine, going through a few of the anomalies on this table. So this one, just for our own interest, and also what we've noticed is not usual or something. Here you've got these amazing granules, so it's like it's not completely been wetted at some point, and as you said, it has a kind of like a white mould, which may or may not be mould, or it might be.
It might just be friction or something.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, exactly. It could be residue from the mould or something. And then moving through this one here, which is in this beautiful minaret.
We've decided to call it a minaret, a pigment minaret.
And this is rose madder. Following on from looking at a few anomalies in the collection, this one you can see at the top is this really bright, beautiful pinky red, but then down here where perhaps UV has got to it and sunlight has shone through the glass, the dye has been bleached out of the substrate particle, which would have been probably alum or chalk, and you can see that just the white sort of original particle or pigment which takes up the dye from the madder plant is actually revealed, and actually
that's all that's left.
And that's all that's left, and it looks almost quite ghostly. You've got these little white patches appearing, so it's quite interesting to see the passage of time on these more kind of reactive pigments. So here in front of us we've got a selection of Cornelessen branded metallic powders in various shades. We've got some gorgeous pale green, gold. This probably would have been a bit more of a purple. It's got a bit brown and pink. And Cornelessen is quite famous for its gilding supplies. We have quite a large collection of not only gold leaf but also bronze powders and also mica powders, which a lot of decorative artists use in their work, and gilders as well. We sold bronze powders like this almost from our very beginning. It's really interesting actually to look at these in detail, because obviously this isn't real gold. This will be a mixture of different metals to emulate what gold looks like, and often with metallic powders you'll get like a coating over each particle to stop any oxidation happening, or any discoloration. But here at the top you can see there's probably a bit of copper involved, because you have a very thin layer of verdigris, and where the air has got in, it's kind of become this kind of whitish powder. So these metals are still reactive, and often when you want to apply them you would mix them with an oil in order to encapsulate every particle of the pigment and stop it from reacting with the environment in any way. And then often after you've done that you would varnish over it as well. Isolating varnishes have been used for a very long time to encapsulate reactive and tricky pigments that would react with, for example, sulfur from the air, which verdigris does. It often goes brown if it comes into contact with sulfur. We also have a range of pigments which are also metallic, but rather than being bronze powders, which are like genuine metal, they're based around mica pigments, which are coated. It's a mica in conjunction with coloured pigments, like regular coloured pigments. Mica is it's actually a mineral, but it's actually very sparkly. So those two in conjunction often are again layered on a really, really small scale on each of the particles of the pigment in order to create like a kind of gold effect. And because they don't include as much of these reactive metals, they tend to be much more inert, and they don't change over time, but they don't quite have the same luster and kind of density of sort of metallic gold look that these ones do have. So you kind of have to, when you're gilding something, you have to weigh up what, you know, whether you want your choice, whether you kind of want to take a risk or not.
And so we found also.
Oh yeah, moving on to this.
Yeah, moving on to this because it's really so that little collection appeared also a little bit here and there. We finally were all put back together, and then that incredible collection, which looked in some cases like this, which I didn't even touch because it felt too precious and too fragile to do anything about, but it was exquisite. Yes, well, I mean, you definitely can show the bunches, and so, and then these are the same in that other box, and they are bronze
really
powders.
Heavy.
They're very heavy,
so
yeah.
heavy.
And a Faber fabric, so with a K, so it's probably German.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole lot was supposed to be ultramarine, and I think it proves your point very well. That when you open it, this is.
Oh wow, it's quite subtle.
It's quite subtle, but it's. I think it's probably shifted also quite a fair bit.
Because it's not really ultramarine; it's more of a kind of softer blue.
But
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, look at the way it moves.
It's
got a life of its own.
Yeah, totally, very sexy.
Looks like snake skin.
Yeah, so these little treasures have just been put back where where we found them. In these little envelopes. They're about 3 or 4 boxes like that, all tied up like love letters from World War I or something.
Yeah, they do. They're very romantic. I think I'd rather get a packet of metallic powder than a love letter.
Oh, there you go. I say things like that. People think I'm a bit weird.
But this is, I mean, we don't sell pigments like this anymore. So, I mean, why? Well, I mean, why do you think this we don't get these little packets? Is it because they kind of get a bit damaged and then all the powder goes everywhere, or it's kind of interesting?
I think we're much more careful around pigments today, and we obviously want much more sealed containers of things, both for the travel and for the client. Really.
Yeah. I love the idea that this was done by hand, and that someone had something similar to these scales, with the bit of paper folded out, weigh the pigment, fold it up. Like this is someone's labour time. That's literally someone's that's like, I don't know, 5 minutes of someone's life.
Ooh,
just there.
I think it would take more.
I mean, yeah, probably, yeah. But imagine how fast that you could get. But that's there's definitely like a human quality to
everything about this collection is actually shows something that we've lost. Labor intensity, definitely, but also the care with which things were labeled, the care with which things were sometimes listed, the incredible. I mean, I'm flabbergasted by the number of types of bottles and jars that I found so far. I'm totally falling in love with bottles, and the care with which all of these were made. Oh, that's a beauty, isn't it?
Like this one is actually hand painted. So you've got they've painted up against the glass, the black, the white, the red, and then they've gilded, probably water gilded the gold, and then probably glued something on the back as well. So you've got this it's actually hand painted, and that's a label. Like imagine how many of these were made. It's
but everything was more precious. I think it probably costed a lot more actually than anything costs today, because we could never, but also they would have been kept and refilled, whereas we just throw away everything, unfortunately. Picked vermilion as an interesting colour to talk about for 2 reasons. One of them is that vermilion is a very, obviously the vermilion that you have in your tubes today is imitation vermilion, and it's not the mercury sulfide original lovely pigment, but quite toxic, of course. And because I discovered as I was cleaning and finding things that there were so many different vermilions, and it's interesting that vermilion now also is more colour
than it is a pigment, and it's a color that has become a sort of orangey red, which it is. I mean, that's quite clear that it is that sort of thing, but actually, as you can see, it also can be quite red. It's virtually not orange. And I had first noticed that in Japan, where things were painted with vermilion and they were actually not, you know, they really ranged from bright oranges all the way to quite deep reds. So originally it's a natural product, however toxic, which was called cinnabar. And that's the cinnabar that they sell here in Cornelessen. And when I made a swatch of that with the historical vermilion pigment that they also sell here, they were virtually on par. They were virtually, you know, amazingly close. And I was pretty excited about that, because very often pigments have a synthetic counterpart, which is actually quite different, you know, like blue verditer, for example, nazarite, or green verditer and malachite, for example, are quite different, and they behave very differently. Whereas there, I thought they were quite on par and quite beautiful. So the original pigment, we found a little beautiful little tube here. Can't really remember where it's from. Does it have a thing? Yes, well, that's from the wonderful place where, you know, Almaden, Spain, which was the biggest cinnabar mine in antiquity, and prisoners only worked in there, and slaves, because it was highly toxic, of course. And the pigment was so expensive that when it was extracted, for example, to take it to places like Pompeii, where they used a lot of that pigment, the pigment was under guarded, guarded watch all the way from the mines to the colormen of the time in Pompeii, as we found one over there. And amusingly enough, I found also some from Pipsimo, a sample here, which is from Italy. Monte Armiata is just next to Naples, and it is a really different color, although both are natural. And and it came not only as a powder like that, but it also came in little granules, which are they somewhere?
Oh, this one.
That's one. So that's what it would have looked like before it was turned into. So it's quite a dullish sort of red like that. You wouldn't get that incredible fiery red that vermilion is. When the synthetic one arrived on the European market, it was a real revelation for painters, because they didn't have anything like that. I mean, they did have red lead, but that was about it. And it was a lot cheaper, of course, to manufacture than it was to extract. And it was at the time new to Europe, but it had been used since high antiquity in China, for example, we know, although there's not a real date to that. And they have continued in China and Japan a real tradition of making vermilion, the synthetic one, but the true one, the genuine one. And I actually visited a place where they made vermilion paste. Well, they made vermilion, and they also made vermilion paste in Kyoto for the seals, because it keeps being very important, because you still have to seal with vermilion your wedding contracts, for example, in Japan. And so, astonishingly enough, these are incredible red ones. I found them in a big envelope, very dirty, some broken. Don't know what created that black mark at the top. Maybe mercury. I'm not a chemist enough, but and they were just on the envelope. It said vermilion from Spain. So could that be real cinnabar? I don't personally know of any manufacturing of vermilion in Spain, but it could absolutely be. So you know, it could be that somebody's making vermilion in Spain too, for all I know. And what I had found along the way is also quite a few variants, like this French vermilion. Again, I have no clue whether it was made in France or it was following some French recipe of a colormen there, or, you know, French. I had never seen that, but it's quite a lovely corally orange. It's quite
much redder
yeah,
than the one
it's
below.
quite different, isn't it? And so it's amusing that, you know, it's become like a color word as opposed to a pigment, like indigo, for example. And it's kind of settled on a hue vaguely that is vermilion. But in fact, what we're discovering, or what I'm discovering rather, is that, you know, there's a recipe and then there's the cook. And so obviously whoever makes vermilion is going to make quite a different vermilion, or at least can play to make a different vermilion in certain cases. I believe that Cennini actually said that the more you grind the artificial one, the more beautiful the red, and you could grind it for a year and it would still be more beautiful. One of the little finds which is exquisite is these little pockets. So they came like that as little envelopes, and they it said on the box that it was letter red from China, genuine, so that is the real vermilion, and it is quite exquisite.
Wow, amazing.
So yeah. One of these little incredible little pockets like that. So no real provenance, probably a factory somewhere in China. Don't know if they still make it, don't know if it's still available, but that's my vermilion finds. And we have here another one, which very, very heavy vermilion, and which has quite separated again. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there. And the only reason we know it is vermilion is it because it says so at the bottom, but what kind of vermilion, we're quite unsure really. And this beautiful one, which has a slightly broken top, but it's another little minaret, and you can literally hardly carry it. It's so incredibly heavy. But that one seems to have fared better, but still you can see nuances of different colors. So I'm not entirely sure what provoked that. Could be a separation of the mercury and the sulfur maybe. But again, I'm not chemist enough to know, so...
The black is interesting because
which one?
The black kind of
at the top.
sediment.
Yes.
That's kind of...
So these could be cinnabar, actually. These could be the natural product from Spain. I have no idea.
Because I've seen frescoes before that were made of cinnabar and they went black over time. So
so maybe they were also in contact with something that produced that chemical reaction. There we go. And that one looks more like potter's pink, but it's actually a totally empty bottle. And it was orange at some stage. And also it seems to have reacted, you know, maybe just the glass, hey? Maybe something in the composition of the glass is enough to alter the pigment. There we go. So that's my little story on vermilion. So one of the most exciting finds, for me anyway, was actually finding 2 bowls of genuine Indian yellow. So that was pretty exciting, and Lucy showed them to you. And I also found later a little jar of genuine Indian yellow. So that made my day. This one is a big jar of bits of Indian yellow, you know, the large full press cake, as Lucy calls them, would have been this size, and somehow, and for some reason, or maybe some broke during transport, or maybe they were sold like that in smaller amounts. It makes more sense really. And that one was just sitting in Nicholas's office, and Lucy has an amazing story about that.
These ones are actually remnants from the Robeson archive. And we have quite a lot of Indian yellow, but not as much as we would have had if accidentally someone wouldn't have thrown away bags and bags of the stuff, which happened to be probably not the best decision to have them in black plastic bags. But when we were, I think, moving, or there was a clear out, someone accidentally threw them away, because they must have thought, what are these very stinky black bags. And if I had not known what they were, I would have thrown them away. So at least we have some left.
So actually, there's lots of things we found that we haven't a clue what they are. There's quite a few boxes of beautiful things that we don't know what they are because the jars are lovely, but you know, their little labels have gone or faded so much we can't read them, or it just, you know, says a very cryptic description on it or no description whatsoever. And so obviously we haven't done the cleaning ladies thing. We have kept them all, although, you know, it would take a long time to analyze them all and to you know, ascertain what they are and whether that's interesting enough for us to do. That'll be maybe a second part of this. Just to finish quickly, I also found quite a few jars of imitation Indian yellow, and again, I'm not entirely sure what pigment it is. Tartrazine is very often to reproduce today Indian yellow, but that is different again. This is far more orange than tartrazine, so what that is, I don't know. So you're asking me of things I've never seen before. There's some incredible pigments from the Brody and Middleton theatrical suppliers. So they came in bits and bobs, and they were not at all in the same place, but eventually I managed to put them all back together. So we have an ultraviolet here. We have sorry, they're all ultraviolets. So one is called Signal Green, another one is called Horizon Blue, that one is Saturn Yellow, and that one is Aurora Pink. So
lovely names.
And then that one is the most fun one, and it's Invisible Blue. Whatever that is, it must have really worked well in the Phantom of the Opera. And then we found later these absolutely totally exquisite, and they don't actually match, so they might be something else again, but they're very fluo when you open them, and they just come in these absolutely exquisite little bottles that looks like an inkwell, that one, and it definitely looks very fluorescent. And these little guys don't open all, but the blue does. That's pretty pale, so it's a bit difficult to know what you're looking at sometimes, really. But just probably what was the most fascinating thing was realizing the number of pigments that there are and there were that didn't make it, that didn't, you know, didn't make a name for themselves, didn't make it to fame. How much these colormen sampled, tried, tested. You know, obviously it's an obsession today of paint makers to have a consistency in their color of, you know, whatever tube name that they. But even that is difficult to get today. So can you imagine, you know, like 100 years ago or 150 years ago, it must have been much worse yet. And there were so many colormen that had a go and had, you know, tried their hands at different colors and different pigments in the 19th century in England. And they've come and gone, and sometimes a few of their, you know, products or material landed in this interesting bric-a-brac, which I'm sure one day will be not ever made really coherent, because that's the fun bit of it, is really pigments are not coherent. They are very diverse, with, you know, all of them amazing personality, which is probably what keeps me most excited about them.
Sabine, out of the colours that we've been looking at here, are there any that you find quite surprising or that you haven't seen before?
Yes, lots actually. Orange madder I had not only never seen before, I had actually never heard of before. So that was quite a surprise, but obviously not to Lucy at all. And then orpiment I used for the first time, and I bought part of the little historical set that you sell in the shop. And orpiment is also a very toxic pigment, and this is a genuine orpiment from the collection of Keith Edwards, Big Poison. it's a beautiful color when you paint with
golden.
it. It's really, I mean, it means or piment, donc pigment or. It's just gold, really.
Yeah.
And its other name was also arsenicon from the Greek, which means arsenic. But the arsenicon came itself from gold and from the sun. And I knew that much later, obviously, this is an antiquity pigment. They had found a substitute for it, a synthetic version, which is king's yellow. And I had heard about it, but I had never seen it before. I find it slightly less interesting. I mean, it's more palish, but again, I haven't used it because, well, first of all, this collection doesn't belong to me, and second of all, we can't open the bottle. So we'd have to actually break into this if we wanted to try it. So I'm sure there must be another way to procure King's Yellow. So it's going to stay safe in this beautiful little box.
So Sabine, from the beginning of your work with us, where do you think your ideas in terms of perhaps utilising a bit of the collection in some way might go for like a future project?
Well, I think a major exhibition called Pigmented at the V&A would be very nice, or if they want us at the Tate, we'll say yes. And actually, I really, really think that this is a little treasure. If, you know, at some stage this business changes hand, it's happened with Windsor. We've seen that a lot of, well, they've tried their best to actually, you know, give and pass on, but then things get dispersed. Robertson is up in Cambridge, I think you said, or Oxford. The Robertson Archives, and you know, the field books are at Windsor, but you can consult them at the Coteau, and it'd be really amazing if we could maybe bring it together in an, you know, just, I think people are more and more interested in pigments. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
I think there's definitely a trend of artists and people interested in the history of art, and also just generally loving the optical sensation you get from pigments, and actually going back to basics and looking at how colour is made, what connotations they have, what you know, the relationship between the raw material and the final product, and how that's actually linked to perhaps a sense of place and local community. It astounds me personally that each one of these colours on this table here are from such diverse places and were made in such diverse ways, and that humankind has such a love for colour that they will do anything really to produce a really bright, luscious colour that will basically give us some kind of feeling, some kind of happiness or joy, or you know.
Yeah, and there's some terrible stories too. I mean, think of these poor cows, and then think of these poor, you know, slaves or prisoners that were working in mercury and sulfur all day long. And then when madder was actually, they found how to synthesize alizarin, which is the coloring stuff of madder, they were, you know, virtually, not overnight, but in a few years, that was the end of all the madder plantations, and it brought on nearly a famine in France, just in the same way as indigo produced a near famine, well, actually a famine in India, because, you know, overnight these two things were synthesized, and there was no need for all that hard work anymore.
Yeah,
and so they're stories of human beings, really. They are our story, which I love, because I think we've always wanted to appropriate colour. It's a given, it's a constant.
It's a human need.
It's a human need.